Anyone ever found a body? What's that like? When I was much younger, say 02 or so, my father belonged to a private hunting lease that was well off the beaten path to get to. The entrance had a locked swinging gate made of 3 inches steel pipe welded together, and the only people with keys were those that had paid to hunt the lease. We live in the deep south of Louisiana where hurricanes are a common occurrence, and on this particular day we were heading back into the woods to set up a new deer stand post-storm. My pops drove a tiny white Nissan truck and we were pulling a trailer with materials to build in a 3-wheeler. The spot he picked out was a mile or so past the gate, down a gravel road about 9 feet wide, and another half mile or so into the woods. As expected, the storm had left many branches and brush across the road, so my job was to ride in the bed and hop out to move shit as needed. And get eaten alive by horse flies. We get 3/4 of the way, and then at this point the gravel road is swamp on both sides and has narrowed to maybe 8 feet wide, and wouldn't you know it, a decent sized water oak is laying across the road. Being well above my pay grade, I grabbed the chainsaw for Pops to get to work and noticed what looked like a clothed mannequin covered in green algae in the water a few feet off the road. Pops spots it too and goes to grab a 4x4 post to try and drag it closer, to see WTF it is. At this point I just remember his demeanor changing and he told me to get in the truck. This man unhooks the loaded trailer by hand and shoves it into the swamp. 36-point turns the truck around and drags the trailer back out and hooks it up. You'll never know how the hell he did that, but I saw it with my own 2 eyes. We book it out of there and he's trying to call 911 but has no service. I'm still pretty clueless, but he tells me he thinks that was a real person. The craziest part is once we make it back to the gate and he gets cell reception, he calls 911 and within minutes the deputy shows up and blocks the gate off. At that point a woman pulls up in a car asking to get back there, stating she was related to the landowners. Cop says no way, etc. She leaves and we think nothing of it. More cops in the corner show up and my dad brings them back there to show them. Fast forward a few months and it comes out that the guy was having some relations with a woman who happened to be the lesbian lover of another woman. When she found out, she murdered the guy and dumped his body back there. How did she have a key, you ask? She was related to the landowners. She was the woman who pulled up to the gate minutes after we got out and the first cop showed up. She had dumped him there because the tree that stopped us had blocked her from going any further into the woods. Add that to the fact that that was the one and only time my pops had gone there without bringing his rifle. Had we been 15 minutes later, she'd have been back there when we were, and who knows what would have happened. She was arrested months later and convicted. Interesting side note, I wound up working for a company over a decade later and randomly recounted the story to some guys in the office, and it turned out one of the guys was related to the deceased individual. Small world. I worked in a retirement home for about a year, more specific at the dementia part of the house, and we had one man who every day was worried sick for his wife, who has been dead for 8 years. On his birthday both of his daughters showed up and talked and showed a lot of pictures. He didn't remember his daughters but he recognized his wife. Tears of joy, he watched pictures and then told stories. The morning after when I went to wake him up he was dead. He had a big smile on his face and it was somehow very, very beautiful. I was at the shooting range once, my first time actually, and an older gentleman shot himself in the stall closest to the door. Everyone had to walk right past his body to evacuate. Gruesome. It looks more disturbing in real life than the movies, and everything moved more slowly once I saw it. I was just getting comfortable with my weapon when they called a ceasefire and I stood there wondering what had happened. Suddenly it was calls of everybody get out. Now. Pretty terrifying when you can initially see what's on either side of you because of the lane barriers and you're wondering what the hell happened so bad we're evacuating, then just really sad to realize what happened. There was a kid there about 10 years old with his dad and brother. Hate it. I used to work at this sports bar, so it wasn't uncommon for people to leave their car in parking lot for a day or two. After having a couple days off I come into work and this car that was there a day before my weekend started is still parked in the same spot. I tell me boss about it and go check it out. As I get close to the car the smell hits me like a truck. Some guy committed suicide in his car during a heat wave in the middle of summer. I call the cops and tell my boss. When the police arrived I was asked to make a statement. While I was doing this, the paramedics showed up to remove the body. They got this bloated rotten corpse halfway out of the vehicle when it just fell apart, splattering on the pavement. I'll never forget that fucking smell. One night I was out walking my dog along a country road where a ditch accompanied the road either side. As I was walking, my dog started going mad trying to tug away from his lead to the ditch, so I wanted to see what it was. It ended up being a corpse, so I called the cops. They found out that a gang murder happened in a city about 40 miles away, and one of the members thought a small village would be a great place to put it. In November of 2004 I had a very best friend who lived 3 blocks from me. We were both managers of the same restaurant, but I had recently graduated from college and had started my career path, but still worked with him on weekends and school vacations. One freezing cold Monday night, the restaurant called saying he hadn't shown up for work. I had a key, so my roommate and I walked over. Upon entering his apartment, he was dead on the couch after taking more than 1 bottle of Ambien and a handle of vodka. I don't remember all the details of what I remember from the scene or what it looked like. I'm paying a lot of money in therapy to forget. My granddad was a few months shy of 90 and still lived by himself. He was pretty spry. My mom called him every morning. One day he didn't answer, so she called me to go over and check on him. They lived about 40 minutes away and I live about 5 minutes away. I let myself in and found him in his easy chair holding his phone. He was cold. My dad showed up in about 20 minutes and we both cried. I called the police and they came in, checked it out and did us a favor of calling the funeral home we asked. My dad said he was talking with him about 9 p.m. the night before and said he was sounding groggy, so he said goodnight, and Granddad must have rested and passed. He was a great guy. Edit, I am overwhelmed with all the kind comments and awards. I truly thank you all. We found a body washed up in the rocks on the beach. I was taking photos of vultures because they were sitting on the rocks and they were pretty large. I first saw his distended stomach and followed it down to his foot. I grabbed my husband and said, "That's a body." "Is that a body?" "Oh my gosh, that's a body." After double checking, we walked away to call 911. Checking a third time, from a different angle, I saw some of the skull missing and the unmistakable human hand. Somehow, we were able to get cell service long enough to tell the 911 dispatcher which state park we were in. Ambulance, firefighters, state police, a Coast Guard helicopter, truck and boat all showed up. It was amazing to watch. They carried him up in a body bag, placed him on the asphalt and left him there for 30 minutes. It was just another day to first responders. Oddly, we are thankful to have found him because he was on part of the beach no one ever crosses the river to get to. The tide was coming in when he was pulled out. Had we not found him, when we found him, the crabs and vultures would have finished him off. His family would have never had answers. I don't know his name or anything other than what we witnessed. We are fine. Our trauma finding a body is nothing compared to what his family would have endured, never knowing what happened to him. Edit, the first responders were amazing to work with. I was so surprised when they asked us how we were doing. EMT came over to confirm the death and said, "How are you handling this? Do you need talk? You are my patient now, there is nothing more I can do for him." The state trooper asked as well. It wasn't until that point we realized we were victims in a way also. A huge shout out and thank you to all of the first responders reading this. Every day, you professionally handle what may likely be somebody's worst nightmare. You're amazing people. Please take care of yourselves. Thank you for all the awards and updates. I've enjoyed reading all the responses. Edit, for those asking, we found him August 21st, 2020 in Oregon. Got back to my GF's house after doing some grocery shopping for her mom, and when we went inside, something was off. Found her older brother with slit wrists in the tub just about the time their mom pulled into the driveway. It was unpleasant. I found my dad's body after he killed himself last year. He was lying face down on his bed, so the blood had pooled down to his stomach and face, making him almost unrecognizable. His face was smooshed in, and his body was mottled blue, as he had killed himself during the night. It was an overdose. He mixed bottles of pills, oxycodone, Flexeril, Ativan, amitriptyline, and more, with alcohol and stopped breathing. I'll never forget time slowing down, and feeling as if I wasn't there. I have severe anxiety and have dissociated before, but the dissociation that hits you when you experience trauma like this is truly something else. I knew he was dead, but my mind wasn't letting me acknowledge it. I was apparently screaming and I don't remember doing so. I tried to wake him up. I called to him and touched his shoulders and accidentally stepped in the puddle where he had peed himself. Feeling how stiff and cold his body was jarring. I was still in shock, but I remember it finally semi-clicking in my brain that he was dead the moment I touched him. I called emergency services but don't remember the process of doing so. My dad had been suicidal for years, and I was used to taking care of him during his drug and alcohol binges. As such, I had been mentally preparing myself for this moment for years. He had tried to mutilate and shoot himself a year before, and I'd cleaned his blood then. I had even worked crime and trauma scene cleanup for a few years. I've seen terrible things. I've cleaned blood, brain matter, bone, and more. But finding my own dad dead shocked me so much that I finally blacked out as he was wheeled away. I ended up having to clean everything up again, even after I'd made my dad promise me he'd never do this to me again. Nothing will ever completely prepare you for losing a loved one or finding a body. No matter how much you may think you're desensitized or used to it, or think you may be okay, in the end nobody knows how they will react. To this day, my family's screams of anguish are what I remember the most from that day. The absolute worst part is the guilt and shame that rocks through you. You wonder if there was something you could have done to save them. You wonder if they'd still be alive if only you had done X or Y. Over a year later and I'm still suffering these thoughts. I would never wish this on anyone. Back in the mid-80s, fresh out of college, got a job on a survey crew for the summer working on a section of highway just off of Interstate 80 in Wyoming. We always came across dead animals that had been hit by cars, but one day we had pulled off in a secured spot to eat lunch when we saw something out in the field, literally 40 miles from the nearest town, flopping around. We just passed it off as some deer that had been hit by a car and had crawled into the field to die. We went on and ate our lunch. Before we went back to work, our survey crew leader said, "Let's go take a look at what that is." The closer we got, we all knew it was a human being. She was still alive, barely, but still alive. We radioed in what we discovered and within about 30 minutes an air ambulance was on the scene. Before the ambulance got there we gave her water but didn't move her. She couldn't speak but we could tell she was thankful we were there and found her. They flew her down to Colorado where she made a full recovery. Turned out she was traveling cross country with her boyfriend when they got into an argument and he decided to off her and dump her body. Thing was, she wasn't dead when he dumped her body where we found her. He had beat her and strangled her with a rope, and when she passed out he thought she was dead and dumped her. Never heard any more, but only knows she made a full recovery and the guy went to prison.